My name is and I'll be your MC for this evening. Tonight's special occasion is the launch of the newly published book called Nase Legende, Our Legends by Mr. Slobodan Lazovic. We welcome His Excellency Branko Zadošević, General Consul of the Republic of Serbia, the State Member of Parliament for Liverpool, the Honourable Mr. Paul Lynch, who is running a couple of minutes late, representatives from the Liverpool City Library, Mr. Roman Siriesco and Ms. Biljana Tomka, translator and lover of poetry, Ms. Melania Petranovic, President of Liverpool City and District Historical Society, Ms. Judy Pack, representatives from the ethnic media in Australia, spoken in the Serbian language, from Vesti newspaper, Director Rajko Milovanovic, from Serbian Voice newspaper, Mr. Joca Gajesko. I'd also like to welcome Father Dragan Slobodanovic. Before we go further, I'd like to call upon Ms. Milica Đurišić to read out a letter from Ms. Wendy Waller, the Mayor of Liverpool, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but extends her warm wishes to Mr. Slobodan Lazovic regarding his newly published book.
Dear Mr. Lazovic, it is with great pleasure that I extend congratulations on behalf of Liverpool City Council on the occasion of the launch of Nase Legende, Our Legends, a collection of stories written in the Serbian language about representative families that emigrated to Australia from the late 1860s onwards. I understand that these families came from Montenegro and other lands from the former Yugoslavia. Please accept my apologies for the launch, as it is a busy time of the year and I have a number of conflicting commitments. I wish to place on record my appreciation of the contribution made by those courageous people who, for varying reasons, uprooted themselves from their homes and made the often dangerous journey to a foreign country. In most cases, they have embraced Australia and its people and customs. Many of them joined the Australian Armed Forces and fought in both World War I and II for their adopted country. The Montenegrin community and their descendants have enriched our culture and continue to be an integral thread entwined in our city's multicultural tapestry. The Montenegrin community is a strong one, and it is important that such stories are told, that heritage is treasured and memories are captured in such a way that they will not be lost to future generations. I look forward to reading a translated version of the book when this is available. Please accept my personal best wishes to all present for a happy and safe Christmas and New Year. Yours sincerely, Mayor Wendy Waller.
I'd like to start by wishing everyone here tonight a pleasant and warm thank you for attending the promotion of the book Nase Legende, Our Legends. The publishers of the book are Editing House, Medion from Podgorica and the Montenegrin Cultural and Art Society, Njegor Sydney. The book is published in the Serbian language. We'll now have our guest speakers to come up on stage to say a few words about the book. I'd like to call upon Mr. Roman Silvieska.
Thank you very much, thank you. And I would like to thank you for inviting me for this launch. Dragi Slobodan, dragi gosti. I know Slobodan several years, and I know that he is very active member of the cultural and art society, Montenegrin cultural and art society. And I admire his commitment and his dedication in preserving the history of Montenegrin society in Australia. This is an invaluable source of information for the future generations, of Montenegrins and also Australian, because Montenegrin society is part of Australian society. And I'm sure that this is not the last book of Slobodan, but there will be the third book. I would like to introduce to you also that we have in Liverpool City Library over 2,000 collection of Serbian books and DVDs and movies, over 600 Croatian and 300 Bosnian, and also we hold a small Macedonian collection. So these books, which would be published and written by Slobodan, they are already included in our collection, and the second book, which is on the table here, will be included also. And I hope that the next third book will come up in the next few years and also will be included in our collection. The title of this book is Our Legend. I'm sure that part of this legend is Slobodan. Can you please, together with me, give a hand for Slobodan?
I'd like to call upon now Ms. Melania Petranovic.
A few months ago, Mr. Lazovic asked me to translate 4 poems by Slobodan Lazovic, which he wanted to include in this book. When I read them, I was moved by the beauty, style, and feeling for faraway Montenegro, the land of birth of his father, which he never visited, but he managed to put his finger on its pulse. My first thought was, what a father who managed to imbue his son with so much love for his faraway homeland. And then I got the book. I was asked to say something about this book. It is a rare jewel of a book, written by a worker about workers. Mr. Lazovic, a former metal worker, managed to collect, with the help of a lot of other people, patiently and painstakingly, a wealth of fascinating detail. He chronicled the arrival and life of a few of our early migrants from Montenegro and their life and achievements in Australia. There is a photocopy page of a Montenegrin travel pass issued in 1837 and the Montenegrin passport issued on 21st of December 1840, both signed by Petar Petrović Njegoš, the famous poet and Prince Bishop of Montenegro. Truly a rare treasure to see these days, especially at the other end of the world, in Australia. The text starts with the earliest known arrivals to Australia from Montenegro between 1860 and 1873. Then we come to the brothers George and Spasoje Jovanovic. George got his passport in 903, and from his native Morača traveled first to South Africa. From there he went to Arizona, where his brother Spasoje joined him. Then through New Zealand they arrived in Brisbane in 910. They both joined the Australian Army. George fought in Europe in the First World War and was badly injured at Ypres whilst Pastor fought later in Japan. George's story is the most detailed. We read his touching letters to his sweetheart, Ella Burns, from the front, and follow his life from his return from the front, the arrival of his 5 children and his achievements in the local society, his appointment as a post office manager and a JP in Bollywood, where he finally settled. There is a fascinating chapter on Flora Sands, a British nurse who was sent by the British Red Cross in 1914 with 36 nurses to Serbia to assist the Serbians during the Austro-Hungarian offensive. She joined the Serbian Red Cross and eventually the Serbian Army. She was with them on Corfu and went with them through the Albanian Golgotha, ending up a sergeant major in the Serbian Army, in which capacity she visited Australia in 1920. Milo Nikezic was 17 when he first fought the Turks with the Montenegrin forces in 912. He was wounded, then decided to go to Germany to make some money for his ticket to America. The First World War found him there. He was locked up as an enemy civilian, spending almost the whole of the war as a prisoner. He finally escaped near the end of the war. He went to France, then home, where to the surprise of his family, he turned up alive. They already finished mourning him. When he recovered, he went to Cairo. From there, in 1927, he arrived in Fremantle. He then went to Broken Hill, South Australia, then to New South Wales. He bought land in Fairfield and sold his agricultural products at the markets. At the end of the Second World War, by then in his late 40s, he returned home, worked there for a while, married, and returned to Australia, always helping his native land in any way he could. He died in 995, aged almost 100. Krsto Mitrovic arrived in Australia in 1929 and settled in Mount Isa, where he worked in the mine. 10 years later, he brought out his family. His 4 sons were successful in Australia, but never forgot where their father came from and always assisted his former. The 2 Andrich brothers, Vido and Lazo, came in 1927. Vido was laying railway tracks in West Australia. About 10 years after his arrival, Lazo decided he should marry a girl from home. And through friends and relatives, he found a girl, Senka Sholjaka, an 18-year-old, who married a man she never saw, had 10 children with him, and did not see her mother again for 32 years. Lazo was very active, participating in all humanitarian actions of his community. His Senka saying, "Don't forget, I love that stone over there." Fascinating are all the details of our early arrival children and grandchildren contained in the book, too numerous to elaborate on. Please buy the book. Savo Bečić came to Australia in 1937 into a depression. For 4 years he was cutting cane, then came to Sydney. Very active in his local community, he always assisted his former homeland. And in Leppington Bowling Club on a board of merit, 3 prominent members' names are shown, one of whom is Savo Bečić. Luka Marković was himself a child of an immigrant. He came to Australia in 1927. He ended up in Broken Hill, where a group of Yugoslav migrants, some from Dalmatia, in 1929 formed the union-inspired fighting workers' movement of Yugoslav immigrants in Broken Hill, endeavoring to improve work conditions. The movement spread all over Australia. A number of other Yugoslav organizations were formed, and Napredak, Progress, a Yugoslav immigrant newspaper, was published. The Second World War echoed among our migrants here too. They followed what was happening in the old country, and again a number of them joined the Australian Armed Services as volunteers. There were great upheavals in our community due to divided loyalties. The details too numerous to mention. Mr. Lazovic included a terrible crime committed by migrant Pero Rajcevic in Boulder in 1942, allegedly because he was rejected from serving in the Australian Army. Using explosives, he killed 14 of his compatriots, killing himself too. Who knows what dark thoughts triggered this terrible act? But this too is part of our migrant history. There is a chapter on the two Marins, Marin Kovacevic and Marin Alevic, whose whole life in Australia was devoted to service to their community. Quite a lot of text is devoted to Jugal Soccer Club, in which both of them were very active. The text then touches on the arrival of immigrants who were members of ex-royalist forces and their attitudes on arrival. Man does not live by bread alone, and eventually our migrants wish to take care of their spiritual life too. Thus, the first Serbian Orthodox church was built in Flemington. In 1949, one of our migrants from the Paštović clan, Sava Srzintić, donated a block of land in Warwood, which was sold. A larger block was obtained, and the church and community center of St. Sava in Warwood was built. Later, a number of other churches were built too, and a number of our people were decorated with orders of merit by the Holy Synod of the Serbian Orthodox Church. So much about the book. We live in strange Orwellian times in which blatant lies are served as gospel truth. Human life is cheap. And the words democracy and freedom sometimes mean the exact opposite. Greed governs this world of ours, and all sorts of undeserving people walk away with millions, while workers with dependent families keep losing their jobs. The people of this book live by these principles. They desperately love their little mountainous legendary Montenegro, which they left but never forgot. For centuries, their little homeland was a beacon of freedom, surrounded by the great Ottoman Empire, never conquered. With little education and great courage, they came across the world before settling in Australia. When they came here, it was harder to be an immigrant than it is now. Especially so with the looming depression, when people considered that the new arrivals will take their jobs away. They did the hardest, dirtiest, most dangerous work, felling trees, working in mines, sugarcane cutting, laying railway tracks. All they had was their perseverance and their two hands. When they learned the language, they fought for Australia, participated in its life, married local girls or brought brides from home, had families, and prospered. They paved the way for us who came later and remained a shining example for all of us how to live honorably, how to love and respect our past and present homeland, working hard how to love true freedom and be devoted to social justice. This book is but a small piece of Montenegrin migrant history, but a valuable one. The fears, pain, disappointments of the people of this book, as well as their joys, successes, and achievements, are woven into the tapestry of this, our beloved Australia of today, and they are part of her and our history. I recommend it warmly to all our compatriots. All our children should read it. It would give them a glimpse of our beginnings in this, our new homeland.
Now I would welcome Ms. Biljana Tonka.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I work at Liverpool City Library, and I first met Mr. Lazovic 10 years ago at this very library while he was organizing Evening of Poetry, held to commemorate 150 years since the death of Prince Bishop Petar II Petrović Njegoš. My association and friendship with Mr. Lazovic has continued from that first encounter 10 years ago, and I was present at the launch of his first book in 2008, Njegoševci Petokontinenta, Chronicles of Work and Activities of Montenegro Cultural Society Njegoš. I was very surprised and impressed by the enthusiasm and passion with which Mr. Lazovic actively participated in this society and the humanitarian efforts which have ultimately led to the documentation of the many stories from this time period into a single compilation. The book was received with a great interest and positive reviews from both Mr. Lazovic friends and the wider community. Earlier this year, Mr. Lazovic again attended Liverpool Library with this new book, and I was left pleasantly surprised and intrigued. It is obvious from the amount of research of history that this book is a dedication to the great efforts and love of Mr. Lazovic to preserve these inspiring stories in the memories for future generations and the history of our people on this continent. I read this book, Our Legends, with a great interest and found that the destiny and varying parts of life these pioneers encountered in early times are very similar to those of the more recent immigrants to Australia. Yet they are uniquely inspiring and original, that each one has the potential to become a motion picture. This book tells of the unimaginable uncertainty their journeys brought and the twist of fate life threw at them through the Jovanovic brothers, Milo Nikezic, Krsto Mitrovic, and the many others mentioned throughout the book. Their lengthy travels to Australia sometimes lasted years, and when they arrived in this unfamiliar language, they were met with laborious jobs that included working in the mines, cutting sugar cane, and working in forests. But perhaps the most difficult of all challenges was the great distance of their old home to their new home and the separation from close relatives and friends. Some of them even joined the Australian war efforts in the First and Second World Wars. Despite these physical and emotional obstacles, the majority succeeded in establishing their own families and assimilating into Australian society. At the same time, the connection to the home country has been developed and maintained by the generations who have since been born and raised in Australia. It is through enthusiasts and historical researchers such as Mr. Lazovic and their works that the rich history of early migrants to Australia will be told and upheld as a learning point and snapshot in time for future generations for all ethnicities and act as a platform for understanding the struggles of entering into a new world. Well, congratulations, Mr. Lazovic.
This evening we will recite two poems that have been reprinted in the book in the English language, and the author of the poems is Mr. Danilo Jovanovic. These poems were written many years ago, in fact prior to World War II. The two poems to be read are Ancestral Crna Gora and Power Montenegro. Due to the far distance of this hometown, at his age of 92 years old, Mr. Danilo Jovanovic couldn't be here with us. I would now like to call upon Ms. Duška Jokanovic to read the first poem.
Crna Gora, land from whence my father came. How my heart with rapture pulses when I hear thy fabled name. And I hear soft voices calling from the mountains, wild and free, accompanied by the gusla with its haunting melody. So I look towards the shoreline where the northern lights appear. Their historic visions haunt me and the pictures are so clear. Ubavoj nam Crna Gora, land of valor, calm and strong. In my heart I hear thee singing, and it is a patriotic song. Know ye not that I have not languished in a land across the foam. Only God can give me answer. You have always been my home. There is no land that is perfect, but within this heart of mine, Stara Crna Gora leadeth in the golden book divine. When the continent of Europe by the invaders were caught, Crna Gora stood, surrounded, for 500 years she fought. There was on blood-stained mountains, mid the slush and slime and snow, nurses tended wounded soldiers, there 500 years ago. Unaided there she stood alone, the foe could not transgress, with ammunition running low, she melted her printing press. Marko Drakalovic, I hear you as your blood stirs in my veins, and I mourn for fallen heroes on the far Kosovian plains. Bishop Njegoš wrote your history in his brilliant mountain wreath, so I prefer my own effort and my heart to you bequeath. O smallest among all kingdoms with the purest of ideas, yet transcending all the nations with the greatest mountaineers. Crown of the Balkans unblemished, forever to you I'm bound. May God in mercy allow me to tread the hallowed ground. Only unity of purpose with humility and grace, coupled with a contrite heart, can mould the Slavonic race. Crna Gora, my affection is a love, a passion, a fire, which consume me with a yearning till the time that I expire.
Thank you, Mister. I would now like to call upon Tanja Đurišić to read the second poem.
Montenegro, my thoughts are never ever still, with imaginings they fill, of the land of sun and snow where I ever long to go, Montenegro. Rugged mountains now can all, carved a fortress, strong and bold, battered back, a foreign foe, where the rivers dance and flow, Montenegro. From the distant eagle's nest, come the man I love the best, my truer man on earth I know, through my veins his blood doth flow, Montenegro. My mother came from England ground, no fairer women can be found. Nature did on her bestow beauty that will ever grow, Montenegro. A Crna Gora, land of fame, I'm part of thee in soul and name. On Lovchen peaks where breezes blow, my heart is wandering to and fro, Montenegro. Restless is the heart of mine, chained by gifts, twill ever pine, till I smash the thrones and go to the land of sun and snow, Montenegro.
In one of the chapters, the author Slobodan Lazovic describes the story of one of the main heroes of the book. To recite a short extract of the story in the Serbian language, I welcome Mr. Vladimir Kanovic.
Početkom 1916. na dan odlaska broda Osterli, skoro čitavi Sidnej izašao je, da isprati svoju mladost u neizvjesnu misiju uz ponos, ali opravdani strah da se mnogi od njih neće vratiti svojim kućama i svojim dragima. Sidnej i Australije su ih veličanstveno ispraćali, oni su vojnički i dostojanstveno sa broda pozdravljali. Između vojnih obaveza na brodu, Đorđe se u slobodnim satima prepuštao mislima i sjećao priča svog oca Živka o svojim korijenima. Sjećao se kako mu je govorio da su njihov predak Jovan Vujošević, od koga postaše Jovanovići, i brat Teodosije, kasnije sveštenik, morali napustiti svoj rodni kraj i iz Huča preći u Donju Moraču, tačnije u Osredke, odnosno Ljutu, zbog ubojstva nekog Turčina. U mislima su mu se vraćali prizori toga živopisnog kraja, iz vremena kada je kao dijete, pomažujući roditeljima, dolazio u čuvnu bogomolju hram Uspenja Presvete Bogorodice manastir Moraču. Rekli su mu da su ga tu ukrstili. Znao je da taj hram podigao Stevan Vuka Nemanjić u 13. vijeku. Sjećao se divnih fresaka iz tog znamenitog manastira. Najviše mu se pojavljivala freska svetog proroka Ilije, kako ga Gavran hrani. Također ga je u mislima pratila veličanstvena freska Kolo anđela, za koje je nekako osjećao kao da ga zovu da im se pridruži. Slika živopisnog vodopada Svetih Gora, koji se uliva u rijeku Moraču, ostala je također trajno urezana u njegovo pamćenje. Išao je u neizvjesnost, ali ga je hrabrilo što se javi da bude istinski vojnik svoje nove domovine i da se i njemu pružila prilika da u ovom ratu bude jedan od onih koji će dati svoj doprinos za pobjedu nad okuputarom njegovom zavičaja. Snažno ga je privlačila misao i želja da kad bi kako mogao sada ili poslije vojne ode malo u svoj stari kraj, da vidi roditelje i sve rođake, da im se pojavi onako u uniformi i da ih sve iznenadi i kaže da je i on izdaleka došao da pomogne slamanju crno-žute monarhije. U mislima se vraćao i u nedavnu prošlost, svojoj Eli, koja ga sa nestrpljenom čeka da se vrati. Razmišljao je kako će i kojim redom kad se vrati ostvarivati planove koji su zajedno dogovarali i kovali u dugim šetnjama i zanosnim razgovorima. Kada se ova svetska gužva završi, kada se njih dvoje vjenčaju i malo srede, onda će on sa svojom suprugom poći u Crnu Goru da je pokaže svima. Da je što bolje upozna sa svojim narodom i sa svime što pripada istoriji tog naroda i kraja odakle je i on. Da to ne budu samo njegove priče, nego da se ona sama uvjeri u sve ono što je za vrijeme njihovog poznanstva i druženja pričao. Ponovo su mu pred oči dolazile slike njegove Ele, kako ga isplakana isplaća sa svojim roditeljima. Tada se razdvojio i sa svojim bratom Spasojem, prvi put otkad su se ponovo sastali u svijetu. Brat ga je hrabrio i zavidio mu, a istovremeno se bratski ljutio što ga je poslušao da ostane u Australiji i ne ide s njim. Nisi me trebao zadržavati da ostanem, gdje jedan tu i drugi, rekao mu je na rastanku Spasoje. Đorđe mu je kratko i mudro odgovorio, dosta je jedan Jovanović za sada među dobrovoljcima. David i Margaret, budući tast i tašta, su ga savjetovali da se čuva i pazi. Ela ga čvrsto držala za ruku. Njihova pisma bila su vrlo česta, neprekidan lanac. Ona je često, ne čekajući odgovor, već slala i drugo pismo. Obavještavala ga da obavezno slušaju vijesti sa rata, da se i njeni roditelji živo interesuju za njega. Napominje mu da treba da se pazi i da se nada da će se rat završiti uskoro. Javljala mu sve što je čula na vijestima odande. Razdvojenost je još više snažila i rasplamsamavala njihova osjećanja i želju da ponovo budu zajedno. Ona je u ovom periodu razdvojenosti ispoljila i pjesničku nadarenost, koja je tinjela u njoj. Njemu su ta i takva pisma otvarala budućnost, osvjetavala rovove u kojima su se ukopani bili, davala mu dodatnu moć za izvršavanje vojnih zadataka kao artiljercu i još veću nadu u opstanak i povratak. U njima je sagledavao njihovu budućnost i stvaranje planova koji su zajedno pravili za vremena kad se on vrati.
Thank you, Vladimir. Before I go on, I would just like to welcome Mr. Paul Lynch, Member of Parliament for Liverpool, and our local doctor, Mr. Chris Bunker. Ladies and gentlemen, we could go on and on about the book, but I think it would be more fun for you to purchase and discover for yourself the amazing stories within. I'm sure you'd agree. We have here tonight present some of the family members and descendants of the people whose stories are told in Nase Legende. I'd like to call up on stage Miss Mary Muir to say a few words.
I think you can hear me without that, can you? Yes. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Mari Muir, and I'm the daughter of George Jovanovic. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the original owners, the Aboriginal people, on whose land we are right now, and pay respect to their elders. Tonight is very exciting for me. I am the proud daughter of a proud Montenegrin, and my partner Ken and our son Rod are here tonight to celebrate the occasion. Our daughter, Mirna, lives in Western Australia and expressed her disappointment that she couldn't be here for the launch. I want to congratulate Slobodana for the work and the research he has put into the book and for the finished product, which I, of course, think is great, having my father, George Jovanovic, on the cover. I understand that the Slobodan got a bit carried away in places, but I put that down to poetic licence. I won't know yet until I can read it, of course. This book represents a history of the ordinary people who came to this country, and it is because of Slobodan's initiative and personal efforts that their story is being told in a way that reflects true history rather than a textbook version. I hope to see the translated version in all our community and school libraries. Unfortunately, neither my brother, sister or I can speak or read the language, so we haven't had an opportunity to read the stories. Those of you here who have more than one language are indeed fortunate. Because Australia is a multicultural society, I think it is important for the history of other cultures to be recorded. Australia for many years saw itself as an Anglo-Saxon culture, even though it benefited from the cultures of other countries, but didn't or wouldn't acknowledge it. So tonight is special for me to have some of the history of the early Montenegrins who settled this land as far back as the mid-19th century. All the descendants of these early settlers have and still have successful lives and are proud to espouse their heritage, and they have made a worthwhile contribution to Australia. It is good to know that the attitudes are slightly better towards those who aren't Anglo-Saxon than they were when my parents met in 1916. My father was on leave in Sydney from the Australian Army before going to France and onto the Western Front when they met. My mother's parents and two sisters opposed any idea of marriage because my mother was told that she would have black children if she married that man. Australia was a very isolated place in 1916, and attitudes were very negative to anyone who wasn't Anglo-Saxon. Those attitudes didn't deter my mother and father, and when he returned from the front, they were married on the 11th of the 11th, 1918. They had a long and successful marriage, including 5 children. The eldest, Danilo, is the poet that has been, his poems have been read tonight. It is interesting to note that over time, my father won the love and respect of his in-laws. I could go on about the Warriewood era, where my father was the first Montenegrin to settle in that area and to establish the glasshouse agriculture. My uncle, his brother, also came to Australia and settled in the area, and today there is a big population of Yugoslavs still there. I guess all this is in the book, so I won't bore you with more details. I can't read it, and I'm looking forward to the translation. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I sincerely hope that when the translation is completed, the book will find its way to community and school libraries as an historical record of early Montenegrin settlers.
Thank you, Ms. Mari Muir. I'd like to call upon now Mr. Spiro Vitrovic.
You want the list? No, list. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Slobodan on a great job he done with our book, or will be ours, and I thank him again. He done a terrific job, and I hope everybody buys his book anyhow. And we all thankful that we've got a man like this. Yeah, we're really proud of Slobodana. He's doing a good job for our people. And thank you very much.
I would like to call upon now another guest speaker, Mr. Nase Legende.
Good evening. This is a story about my father's side of the family. His name was Alex Lazovic. He first came to Australia in 1939 as a 10-year-old. His father, Sabo, and his brother, Ilya, left Montenegro previous to World War I, living in America and France, finally coming to Australia. My grandfather first started working at the railways in Berrima. Then after about a couple of years, they moved to the Northern Beaches. After spending a couple of years in the Manly and Fairlight region, they moved to Monavale, where up until 1949 they gave land to start the first Serbian Orthodox Church in Australia. From then on, my dad basically, and his two brothers, that's George and Steve, and my auntie Eva, basically worked on the farm that they had, which is located in Monavale. With that, my auntie moved on to work in the textile industry. My dad basically owned like a market garden, did a few odd jobs here and there. Basically that's it. There's not really much to go from there. My father's, everything I can say about my father's history, he being the oldest and basically being the patriarch of the family, he did a lot for the community just like his father. His father helped a lot of the local community, a lot of the people that migrated post World War II and even some previous. And with that, after just trying to think of the rest of the say, sorry, a bit nervous here. With that, my father continued on working on the properties at Monavale. He also purchased another property in Warriewood, which he continued on with the other Yugoslav migrants around that area as well. And then from then on, unfortunately, he passed away in 2008. Unfortunately, like the rest of his brothers and his family, they've also passed as well. So I'm basically the last Lazovic left in the area. So I just wanted to say thank you to Slobodan as well too for contacting us and getting information about us. I mean, it's good to see the Montenegrin community strong. I went back to the homeland a couple of years back, and it was just amazed and absolutely beautiful country. Thank you.
Very much for your kind words. We're on the home stretch now. As our next guest speaker, I'd like to call upon His Excellency, General Consul of the Republic of Serbia, Mr. Branko Radošević.
Good evening, dear friends. 10 years ago, here in Liverpool, my good friend Slobodan Lazovic made me a farewell party. Now, when I returned back to Sydney, I discovered that Slobo now is a writer. That in the meantime, he made these this third book. And I haven't time to read it carefully because I found out just when he came to my office to to call me, and I accepted that with a great pleasure, because Slobodan was always a good friend of mine. He's a very decent and very honorable man, and I'm very glad that he's my friend, and I think that he made a great job. I served in Australia first time back in 1983 in Perth, and then I saw on the monument, you know, a lot of names, which obviously was, you know, from the space of former Yugoslavia. And I always ask myself, you know, who's going to tell this story? Who's going to remember these people? How to preserve these memories? And I think that Slava did a great thing, and I think that all of us should be very grateful to him for that. Thank you very much.
I would now like to call upon the Honourable Member of Parliament for Liverpool, Mr. Paul Lynch. Please come up and say a few words.
I commence by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Aboriginal clan of the Darug Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Can I acknowledge the Consul General, Slobodan, of course, Murray Muir, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Can I thank Slobodan for the invitation to be here? It's not so much an invitation, it was more like an order. And those of you that know Slobodan will know exactly what I mean. There are a number of interesting things I think about this book, which I now seem to know a lot about, even though I haven't been able to read it and won't be able to read it until it's translated. But as the history of the Montenegrin community, it tells an interesting Australian story. Unless you've got Indigenous heritage, all of us have come here in the last couple of 100 years. Either you've come yourself from Serbia or Montenegro, or like me, my grandfather came from Ireland in 1912. And if you want to talk about racism in 1912, let me talk to you about the Irish Catholics and what happened in sectarian Australia. All of us have got that migrant history. This land is a land of migrants. It's made up of an extraordinary range of different communities. And as Murray said, attitudes have changed. We were once an Anglo-Saxon enclave. I mean, my own history. If you were an Irish Catholic, you couldn't actually celebrate your religion originally. It was a crime to say the Catholic Mass. That's where this colony started. We have moved a very, very long way. We now have a society that we call multicultural. It is from time to time under threat. Some of our talkback radio hosts and tabloid journalists still seem to think we're an Anglo-Saxon enclave. Those people that have that vision of Australia don't actually understand our history. They don't understand the Irish migrants, the Montenegrin migrants, the Serbian migrants, and all the others in between, because it's that diversity that has given us the Australia that we know. By definition almost, if this is a good place in which to live, it's because of the contribution of wave after wave of migrants, of communities like the Montenegrins and the Serbians. That's why this is such a great country in which to live, because we've got that history and those contributions from so many people. And the stories in that book tell that story, or they tell the part of that story that relates to the Montenegrin community. So I desperately look forward to the translation, because I think it is a useful bit of Australian history to tell that particular part of it. And the other thing I think the book's about, once again, as I keep saying I haven't read it, but listening to some of the speakers talking about it, I deal with a lot of communities, as you'd imagine. That's my job as the member for Liverpool. And there are some communities that like to talk about their great big heroes that have come out here, and there's one here and one there. My sense of what's in the book is that it's a lot broader than that. It's about a history of ordinary people, of what historians might call a history from below. That it's a democratic history, if you will, an egalitarian history of workers, not just of businessmen, a history of the entire community. And that's what history should be. That's the way history should be written. It should be about everyone, not just a handful of elites. And I suspect that's probably got something to do with Slobodan's perspective on a whole range of things, including life in general and politics. But it's actually what history should be about. Can I perhaps just conclude by congratulating Slobodan for what's obviously a very impressive achievement and for something that clearly has a great deal of support within the community. He's done very well. Congratulations.